history, a mirror of my world. I'm here to speckles with him.
Punk rock is a genre of music, a subculture, and a political movement that has its roots in the ideas of rebellion and resistance against the status quo, as well as anti-authoritarianism, freedom of expression, and anti-fascism. Musically, it is usually defined by the presence of distorted electric guitar, power chords, fast and/or heavy drums, and impassioned vocals that often cross over from pitched singing to harsh screaming. Before the coinage of punk rock as a term, there were bands that were pioneering the sound and styles that become associated with the genre. Bands such as the Motor City 5 and the Stooges came to prominence in the late 1960s. They both released their first albums, Kick Out the Jams and the self-titled The Stooges respectively, in 1969 and brought with them a sound that would come to be known as proto-punk. The 1970s is when the term punk rock became popular to describe the sound of bands like NC5 and the Stooges, and the term became popular when the Ramones exploded onto the scene in 1976 with their self-titled first album. War and a rise of conservatism in politics caused many to grow discontented with the status quo, leading to punk rock to explode in popularity. In the United Kingdom, similar conservative shifts caused the UK punk scene to explode as well, with bands like The Clash and the Sex Pistols reaching mainstream popularity. However, the punk movement would taper as the Ramones continued to grow into superstars. The conservative shift of the 1970s died down, which caused unrest to die down enough for the movement to wane, and by 1980, there was a growing sentiment that punk, or at least punk in the public eye, was dead. The 1980s brought with it the election of President Ronald Reagan and signaled a massive pendulum shift back toward conservatism in America. Naturally, a rise in cultural conservatism created a rise in anti-establishment counterculture, and suddenly punk rock found itself with new life in the form of hardcore. Hardcore is, as the name suggests, more aggressive and unclean than 1970s punk rock. New bands like Bad Religion, NoFX, Dead Kennedys, and Bad Brains burst onto the scene and created a new, less monolithic scene for the genre that would influence many artists henceforth, punk or otherwise. This less monolithic idea of punk rock would continue through the 1990s and 2000s. The release of Nirvana's Nevermind, an album from a similar genre to punk, grunge, led many subgenres to synthesize into what became simply known as alt culture. Green Day's release of the album American Idiot in 2004 brought pop punk, a subgenre of punk rock that was more heavily inspired by pop music, to prominence as well. Nowadays, similarly to how it happened in the 80s, shifts in culture toward conservatism and a conservative administration in the US has caused punk rock to regain popularity. Protests against ICE have commonly featured punk rock shows, and a plethora of bands like Pears, Direct Hit, Shatpile, and Brain have gained popularity. Punk as a countercultural movement most often pops up when civil unrest begins. Since its inception, punk has changed, and its core tenets of resistance and against anti-authoritarianism are still intact.